This is the London Court of International Arbitration. It's a place where companies and countries come to settle their differences, but not if you're from Belize. Its government has just passed a new law aimed at stopping people using the international arbitration system. Belize is the only country in the world which will make you a criminal just for coming here.
Arbitration has proved itself over the generations to be a fully impartial and independent system. It is a system which doesn't belong to any national criteria, and therefore they feel a level of confidence because although it's not their own system, it doesn't belong to somebody else.
The new law was passed by the National Assembly in April and has already caused astonishment in the business community. If your contract contains an international arbitration clause and you seek to implement it against the wishes of the government, you can even be imprisoned.
This is radical, it is draconian, it is unprecedented, and I really have a fundamental difficulty with it. This is designed to be a tool in the government's arsenal to terrorize people into not taking the government to court for arbitrations.
You'd expect a law that stops people from seeking justice and imposes such huge penalties to have been debated at length. But the usual processes were bypassed. It wasn't debated by the Bar Association, the business community, or even the judiciary.
Well, I was very surprised because, first of all, it came as a part of the package of amendments and legislation in support of the government's annual budget. Then I said, well, what in the name of God is this? It was totally unrelated to the budget, really. And so I was struck by that. No consultation. It was put through the House in 2 meetings very quickly.
The biggest issue with this new act is that it deprives people of a fundamental human right.
In every civilized system, we have what's called the presumption of innocence. A person is presumed innocent until they are proved to be guilty. The Act dispenses with the presumption of innocence for people who are shareholders, officers, managers of companies who have breached injunctions, and puts the burden on them of proving that they were not involved. And that is a position which is completely contrary to international law, and indeed it's contrary to the United Nations International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, to which the Belize is a signatory and has ratified.
The penalties imposed by the new act are undeniably harsh. If you're involved in a legal dispute and seek redress through international arbitration, you can be fined up to $500,000 or jailed for 10 years.
I think we also have to look at the sentencing provisions, which are extremely draconian. In fact, somebody guilty of rape will look at something like 8 years. Yet for contempt, in this law, you can get up to 10 years.
The law that has been created reaches far beyond Belize. The government has the power to prosecute any organisation or individual anywhere in the world.
Quite frankly, it's a rather extraordinary piece of legislation. And in fact, it's extremely unusual for an act to have what we would term universal jurisdiction. Universal jurisdiction means that it applies to any person of whatever nationality anywhere in the world. And those type of crimes are usually reserved for the most heinous sort. For instance, crimes against humanity, genocide, torture, slavery. They are never imposed for ordinary domestic offences. For instance, murder is never seen as a crime of universal jurisdiction.
The government of Belize currently has 3 international arbitration awards against it, totaling nearly $50 million, with more to follow. This new law tries to avoid paying those debts.
Is there any difference between the party that says, I know I agreed on arbitration, but I don't want it anymore, to the party that said, I agreed the price for the goods, but I don't want to pay that anymore?
This is the Federal Reserve in Washington. It holds Belize's foreign currency deposits. Some lawyers believe these reserves may now be at risk from seizure.
There are mechanisms for enforcement. The most important is the New York Convention. That has as its purpose to facilitate the enforcement of awards, not only in the country from which the party comes, but also in a country where it has assets. And over 150 countries are now party to the New York Convention.
But the biggest concern facing Belize, following the introduction of this law, is its likely impact on much-needed international investment in the country.
This legislation, in my view, is completely counterproductive to attracting investment to Belize. It is going to chase away investment. Additionally, it is going to be increasingly difficult to attract new investment to Belize because international investors are going to look around and say they can find this legislation or similar legislation in no country, and it is not worth the risk investing in Belize.
By passing this law, Belize has turned its back on international treaties, agreements and human rights conventions. But its impact may be much wider. If one country can so easily reject a major plank of international law, might others also do the same? Belize may need to think again.